do scribble scrabble line art, then we add colors, we add a little bit shading to that, add textures on top, then we do foliage, and as the final result we have ourselves a happy tree. Alright, let's just get started with a tutorial. And the first thing that I usually start is action line. And in here you can see that action line goes like this. And this gives us a little bit more dynamic feel for our drawing, for our tree. And this is kind of what you want to think about when you create your own. And after this, we can draw the roots. So for example, some roots are going to be very big and some of them are going to be a little bit smaller. Just think about the rule of three. The rule of three is great because it's kind of working pretty much for almost any kind of work. One really big one, kind of smaller, and kind of like very, very tiny. And in here, you can see that there's a very thick beginning, a little bit thinner middle, and very, very thin top. And after we created a very simple sketch, we can start drawing a little bit of a ground. So we want to make sure that our tree is more grounded. It's not just flying in the air, right? And our goal here is just to give the illusion, you know, there's might be a floor here. You don't want to give too many details because then if we make too much details in the grass, we're not going to feel like our tree is as important. So you don't want to overdo it. And after we're done with our sketch, I put it on a separate layer. In here, I'm going to go ahead and make a new layer at the bottom. And I'm going to pick a mid-tone or some sort of starting point. So this is going to be a flat. And the flat is basically a main color that we're going to use to paint on top. And we want to follow our path of the tree. And as we go with our strokes, we're going to use that shape and our brush to go along those strokes. And it doesn't have to be very perfect, but as long as you're kind of implying the direction of that, then you should be okay. This will give us a little bit more depth and interesting look to our tree. And you can do this pretty much with any brush as long as it has a little bit of texture, a little bit of transparency. Really doesn't matter what you use for this. I like to start with something simple so I can add complexity a little bit later. So once we have our perfect selection, which we can make a new folder right here, and we're just gonna mask it. This way, if we do anything at all, and I can do this, it's just gonna stay inside of that. And now we can do exactly the same thing, but just for grass. And there's not a lot I'm going to add to this grass, but the main thing I want to make sure is I have a giant shadow in here that is going to be very close to where the tree is going to be, because this is where the tree is going to touch the grass, and it's going to be very, very close, which means the shadow will be very prominent. And in here, I'm just gonna add a very simple highlight to our grass so that we know that's where the sun is shining and we don't have to worry about it not feeling natural. And after this, we're going to add a little bit of shading to our tree. So we're gonna pick this color, do a little bit more bright feel, and then we're gonna do an overlay. I'm just gonna get an airbrush. Light usually comes in the middle of the tree, or it's gonna be from the top. So this is how I'm going to shade this tree trunk. We don't want to go overboard with this shading, but we just want to show that there's light coming from the top, and that's all I want to do with this brush. And after that, we are going to make another layer. Let's just set it to multiply, and we're going to pick a kind of darkish saturated red, and we're going to do another pass of airbrush. We want to see where it's touching the floor, aka this will give us where the major shadows are going to be. And we don't really have to think about most of this because it's very simple shapes. If you really break it down, The tree is just a bunch of cylinders, and if you have a bunch of cylinders, how do you deal with it? Well, you just shade it as a cylinder. Guess what? We're gonna start drawing texture. If you do not know how to draw the tree trunks and that texture that I'm making right now, which I'm not doing it perfectly, I'm just kind of loosely sketching it because I know I'm not gonna be correct, but I am basing it off of memory that I have studied many different trees. So if you never done it before and you want to start doing it, I highly recommend go ahead and find a picture of a tree, right? Look at how the cracks are spreading out and how it looks and all those different things, and just kind of copy and simplify. See what can you learn from it and how does it come together. Obviously, it's not gonna look perfect if you do it for the first time, but I think that everyone can learn it, and it really depends how well you know textures. And you can also go ahead and just see how different trees have different textures. Some of them will be having like a very thick line, some of them are gonna have very small tiny details, some of them are gonna look completely different from the other ones, and that way we can all kind of see how it's going to affect our tree. But let's say we are done with this, and after that we want to start adding our foliage, kind of leaves and all that other good stuff into our tree. I'm going to go ahead and go into a very simple brush that is going to called pointillism, and we're gonna start with a very dark green that will be used as our base because that's kind of what we want. And the main thing I want you to think about is following the stroke. So again, same with the tree, same with the texture of the tree. We want to follow our stroke of the vegetation and the leaves are going to be. And it's very simple if you want to do a very kind of stylized tree. And then I'll do a very simple overlay. I'll do a very dark blue. And I'm going to grab a airbrush, and this way we can start adding a little bit more depth to our grass. Now we're gonna start breaking our shapes down. And Eclipse Studio Paint comes with a leaf brush, just like this. Different particle sizes, so we can do very big ones. And then I go small so that I can kind of see what our leaves are going to look like. And the best part about this is that it's all kind of like randomized enough so that it doesn't feel like you actually have to sit down and see how it's going to look like. This way, I literally just color pick and I add a little bit of texture here and there to add more variety to this. And after we're done with this, we can go ahead with a new layer, select a G pen and just start adding a little bit more variety to our brush strokes, because obviously we don't want to use the foliage brush for everything, and it really depends on the style you're going for and what you feel is like more fun, more comfortable for you. I really like to add kind of like little pill looking thingies, and you can get this effect if you just set up a perfect brush for it, but I like to do it sometimes manually because kind of just gives me more control and just feels more natural when I do it. And after we're done with this, to add more depth to this, we have our leaves on a separate layer and we have our tree on a separate layer. So after this, we're going to select the tree by control and clicking on the layer. And then after that, we're going to mask our leaf to that tree. We're going to remove the little check mark that is in the middle, and we're going to start moving it down just a bit like this. And this way we can actually start adding a little bit of a shadow in here. So this looks kind of whatever, we can do multiply, and then we set it to maybe 50%. And then we do a saturation pass, just a bit, and then we do luminosity. So we can do a more strong shadow in here. And that way we have ourselves a very simple shadow for our tree. We can make a new layer, do a very simple pass of the sky, which will help us make our tree stand out from the background. So just like this. We're gonna add a little bit more blue. And there we go. We have ourselves a very simple kind of card illustration, I guess, kind of feel to this. And after all of that, we can go with another layer and just keep rendering like little details. So if I don't like some, specific parts, I can go pretty much infinitely into this. I can keep painting and painting and painting all of these things in here. It really can take forever or as much as you want. And hopefully this tutorial was useful. It's really kind of a lot to comprehend, I know. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope this was helpful to someone. I also wrote a very small article on Clip Studio Paint for this, in case you're, a little bit lost and you want to do a little bit more step-by-step. So go check it out. Subscribe and like this video. And yeah, happy painting.